They laughed when the Navy SEAL got $2, until his dog uncovered the fortune that ruined every liar in the room. Snow whipped across the Montana courthouse steps as Caleb Mercer walked out with nothing but a worn $2 bill and his retired German shepherd, Titan. Behind him, rich voices laughed through the glass. Then Titan froze, stared at the bill, and bolted for Caleb's old truck. Hidden beneath rusted steel was a letter, a key, and a road leading to a forgotten valley worth $9.4 million. Comment 1 or 0 and tell me where you're watching from. The snow had started before dawn and never truly stopped. By 9 in the morning, the courthouse steps in Harlan County, Montana, wore a thin white skin of ice that crackled under every shoe. Wind pushed powder across the stone railings and gathered it in the corners like forgotten paper. The American flag above the entrance snapped hard against a sky the color of cold steel. Caleb Mercer stood at the bottom of those steps for a long moment before climbing them. Beside him, Titan waited without pulling on the leash. The German shepherd was older now, gray beginning to show around the muzzle, shoulders broad but stiff from years of service and age. One ear bore a notch from a deployment long ago. His dark eyes moved once across the parking lot, once toward the door, then back to Caleb as if checking whether the man was steady enough to proceed. Caleb gave a small nod. They went inside together. The warmth of the lobby hit him first, then the smell, old paper, floor polish, damp wool coats, stale coffee from a machine near the clerk's office. Sounds echoed strangely in the marble hallways, shoes tapping, distant voices, a copier running somewhere behind a closed door. Ordinary sounds. But Caleb's body did not always know the difference between ordinary and danger. He scanned exits automatically. Stairwell to the left, double doors behind him, security desk ahead, 2 men near the bulletin board, woman with a stroller, elderly couple by the benches. No threat. His pulse stayed high anyway. Titan brushed against his leg once, just enough pressure to be felt through the denim. Grounding contact. The dog had done that in airports, grocery stores, church foyers, parking garages, and once in the cereal aisle of a supermarket when Caleb dropped to one knee because a stack of boxes had fallen like rifle fire. Caleb touched Titan's neck briefly. "Good boy," he said under his breath. Courtroom 2B was already crowded. Word had traveled through town the way it always did in places small enough to know each other's business, but large enough to pretend otherwise. People came under the excuse of paperwork, curiosity, errands downtown. They sat in polished wooden benches wearing expressions carefully arranged to look neutral. Caleb recognized faces. A mechanic who once thanked him for helping pull a truck from a ditch. A banker who had shaken his hand at a charity dinner. 2 ranch wives who used to wave when he drove fence lines. Now they looked at him the way people look at weather damage. Sorry it happened. Glad it happened somewhere else. Titan moved beside Caleb down the center aisle with silent discipline. Heads turned. Even those who disliked Caleb respected the dog. At the front of the room sat Rachel Holloway. She wore cream-colored wool, gold earrings, and the composed face of a woman who had rehearsed calm. Her hair fell perfectly over one shoulder. She did not look at Caleb when he entered. She adjusted papers instead. 3 years earlier, she had cried into his chest during thunderstorms. Now she behaved as though he were a contractor whose invoice had become inconvenient. Beside her sat Victor Holloway. Her father was 68 and broad through the shoulders, silver-haired, expensive boots, polished, despite the snow outside. His family had owned land in this county since before paved roads. He carried himself like a man who believed property lines were moral proof. Next to Victor sat their attorney, Martin Sloan, whose smile never reached his eyes. He glanced at Caleb, then at Titan. "I wasn't aware animals were attending today." "They let him in," Caleb said. The attorney smiled a little wider. "How fortunate." Titan did not react. He simply sat at Caleb's side and watched. The judge entered at 9 sharp. Everyone rose. Judge Eleanor Price was in her early 60s, brisk and unsentimental, glasses low on her nose. She had the face of someone who had listened to human excuses for decades and no longer collected them. They sat. The clerk called the case. Price reviewed a few papers, asked several procedural questions, then turned to Martin Sloan. "Counselor, are both parties prepared to finalize?" "We are, Your Honor." She turned to Caleb. "Mr. Mercer?" Caleb's throat felt dry. "Yes, ma'am." Months of motions had led to this morning. Months of fees he could barely pay. Months of hearing his life reduced to phrases like asset exposure, emotional volatility, non-titled labor, separate holdings. The ranch house where he repaired every burst pipe? Not his. The barns he rebuilt after windstorms? Not his. The grazing land he patrolled during wildfire season? Not his. The trucks he maintained, the irrigation lines he laid, the cattle he pulled from snow drifts with frozen hands? No ownership value established. Years of effort turned invisible by paper. Judge Price folded her hands. "Has settlement been reached?" Martin Sloan stood with elegant calm. "Yes, Your Honor. My clients wish to conclude this matter cleanly and with generosity." Victor Holloway leaned back slightly, satisfied already. Rachel kept her gaze lowered. The attorney lifted a small envelope from his briefcase. Its edges were worn. Old. Something about the object tugged faintly at Caleb's memory, but the room was suddenly too bright to grasp it. Sloan continued. "In recognition of Mr. Mercer's time spent on Holloway property, and in the spirit of finality, the Holloway family offers the plaintiff a personal settlement beyond any legal obligation." A murmur moved through the benches. The attorney opened the envelope slowly, enjoying the room's attention. He reached inside. Then he placed a single worn bill on the polished counsel table and slid it across the wood until it stopped in front of Caleb. $2. Old, creased, soft with age. For a second, no one moved. Then someone in the back laughed. Another followed. The sound spread in embarrassed bursts, then fuller, bolder, once permission had been granted. A man coughed into his hand to hide it. One of the ranch wives covered her mouth. Even the bailiff looked away. Victor Holloway did not laugh. He smiled. Rachel's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Martin Sloan straightened his cuff. "My clients feel this accurately reflects the practical contribution made." Caleb heard the words from far away. The room narrowed. Wood grain on the table sharpened. Dust motes in sunlight became visible. A pulse thudded in his neck. The laughter stretched and distorted like sound underwater. Tunnel vision. Not here. Not now. His fingers trembled. He pressed them flat against his knees. A memory flashed without warning. Rotor wash, sand striking skin, radio static, shouting through smoke. Then another sound cut through it. Titan's breathing. Slow. Controlled. Near. Caleb looked down. The dog had not moved. Titan sat in perfect stillness beside the table, posture tall, eyes fixed not on the people laughing, not on Victor Holloway, not on Rachel. On the $2 bill. His stare was absolute. Caleb swallowed. Judge Price rapped her gavel once. "That is enough." The room quieted. Her eyes moved from the attorney to Victor, then to the bill. "Counselor, this court is not a theater." "Of course not, Your Honor," Sloan said smoothly. "Only a symbolic gesture." Price's voice cooled another degree. "I am not interested in symbolism." She turned to Caleb. "Mr. Mercer, do you wish to respond?" Every face in the room came toward him at once. He could have shouted, could have named every midnight repair, every calf saved in snow, every panic attack hidden in the barn so no one would see, every time Titan woke him before he struck walls in sleep, every sacrifice given to people who counted acreage better than kindness. Instead, he looked at the bill, then at Rachel. She finally met his eyes. For one brief second, something moved there. Shame, regret, fear, maybe all three. Then it was gone. Caleb stood slowly. The chair legs scraped the floor. He reached forward and picked up the $2 bill between thumb and forefinger. It felt warm from the courtroom lights. The paper was softer than it should have been. Old enough to have passed through many hands. Titan rose the instant Caleb did. Judge Price watched carefully. "Mr. Mercer?" Caleb folded the bill once and slid it into his coat pocket. His voice came out rough but steady. "I've got nothing to say." He turned. The benches parted as he walked the aisle with Titan at heel. No one laughed now. The courthouse hallway felt colder than outside. He pushed through the doors into the snow, and the wind hit his face like clean water. Down the steps, across the lot. His truck waited under a dusting of white near the far curb, an aging pickup with rust around the wheel wells and one taillight held by tape. Halfway there, his breathing broke. Not tears. Something harsher. The kind of breath a man takes when he has held himself together too long. He stopped beside the truck and braced one hand on the hood. The parking lot blurred. "I should have known," he whispered to no one. Titan came close and pressed his body against Caleb's leg. Warm weight. Real weight. Caleb reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the bill. Snow landed on the faded green paper and melted there. $2. That was what they thought of him. That was what he had let himself become. He stared at it until the edges shook in his hand. Then Titan changed. The dog's ears snapped forward. Muscles tightened under thick fur. A low sound rolled from his chest. Not anger, not fear, but certainty. Before Caleb could react, Titan lunged, snatched the $2 bill cleanly from his fingers, and sprinted toward the passenger side of the truck. "Titan!" The shepherd ignored him. He leaped through the open door Caleb had left cracked, disappeared inside, then began clawing furiously beneath the passenger seat. Metal rattled. Something old and hidden scraped loose. Caleb froze in the blowing snow. Inside the cab, Titan barked once, sharp, demanding. And for the first time that day, Caleb Mercer felt something stronger than humiliation. Curiosity. He moved toward the truck. The wind howled across the courthouse lot behind him. Somewhere above, unseen through snow, the flag kept snapping in the cold. Caleb Mercer yanked open the passenger door of the truck and leaned inside. Titan was half under the seat, shoulders wedged tight, claws scraping against metal. Snow blew through the open door and melted across the cracked vinyl bench. The dog growled softly with concentration, then jerked backward hard enough to shake the whole comb. A rusted steel toolbox slid free from beneath the seat rails. Caleb stared at it. He had driven this truck for 6 years, changed oil under it, replaced brake lines, slept in it twice after arguments, hauled lumber, feed sacks, barbed wire, fencing posts. He had vacuumed the cab, cursed the transmission, replaced the battery in winter with numb fingers. He had never seen the box. Titan backed away and sat immediately, eyes on Caleb, chest rising in white puffs. "You knew it was there?" Caleb asked. Titan thumped his tail once against the floor mat. Caleb reached in and lifted the box out carefully. It was heavier than it looked. Old scratches marked the lid. A small brass latch had darkened with age. Taped beneath the handle was the folded $2 bill, damp now from snow and dog saliva. His hands shook again, but not from the courtroom. From something stranger. He opened the latch. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with time. Across the front, in block handwriting, he had not seen since childhood. For Caleb. Open only when they think you lost. He sat down in the driver's seat without meaning to. The truck door remained open. Snow blew in and gathered on the floorboards. Titan jumped in beside him and faced outward like a sentry, watching the courthouse steps. Caleb touched the writing with one thumb. He knew those letters. Every line square and deliberate, like fence posts driven straight into earth. His grandfather, Earl Mercer, had written like that. Earl, who had died 8 years earlier with calloused hands and less than $400 in his checking account. Earl, who fixed engines with baling wire and sharpened knives on the porch. Earl, who never used 10 words where 3 would do. Earl, who everyone in town said had been proud, stubborn, poor, and impossible to impress. Caleb swallowed hard and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: an iron key, black with age, a folded county map with a red circle drawn deep in the mountains west of the Idaho line, and a note. Take Titan. He remembers. Caleb read it twice, then a third time. His pulse slowed in a way it had not all morning. Snow hissed across the windshield. Titan turned and looked at him. What do you remember? Caleb asked quietly. The dog held his gaze. There had been a time when Caleb believed animals were simpler than people. Then he had gone to war with one. Titan had once found a pressure plate under sand no human eye could see. He had once woken Caleb seconds before mortar fire. He had once refused to enter a building until a hidden child was discovered inside. Dogs remembered differently, but they remembered. Caleb folded the map open across the steering wheel. The circle marked an area of high timber and forgotten county roads in northern Idaho, near ridges where winter shut the world down for months. There was no address, only a narrow pencil line and coordinates written beside it. He looked back at the courthouse. Warm lights glowed through second-floor windows. People still moved inside like shadows in an aquarium. Rachel might still be there. Victor Holloway certainly was. Maybe they were laughing again now that he had gone. Maybe not. It no longer mattered in the same way. Caleb started the truck. The engine coughed, then caught. He put the heater on full blast. It answered with a weak groan and dusty warmth. Titan settled into the passenger seat with the old certainty of a dog who trusted movement more than thought. Caleb drove out of the lot without looking back. 3 hours later, Montana fell behind them in long strips of highway and pine. The storm followed west. Snow swept sideways across open fields and wrapped the mountains in shifting white curtains. Fence posts appeared and vanished. Frozen creeks flashed under bridges like dark seams in the land. The farther he drove, the quieter Caleb became. That was usually when memory arrived. He had come home from overseas 11 years earlier, on a hot July afternoon in North Carolina. People waved flags at the base entrance. Someone handed out bottled water. A brass band played too brightly under the sun. He remembered none of that clearly. What he remembered was stepping off the transport and hearing a forklift drop a pallet somewhere behind a warehouse. The bang sent him flat to the pavement before his mind understood where he was. Hands reached for him. Voices shouted. Titan, then younger and all muscle, had crossed the distance in 2 bounds and planted himself over Caleb's chest, blocking everyone else until Caleb could breathe again. Later, a medic told him the dog had likely prevented 3 men from being bitten. Titan had simply done what he believed the mission required. Protect the handler. Always. Caleb drove with one hand on the wheel and one resting near Titan's shoulder. The dog leaned into it. He remembered the first months after war. Sleeping in 20-minute bursts, checking windows at 2 a.m., losing his temper when the microwave beeped, driving 20 miles out of town because a child's bicycle lying on a sidewalk made his chest lock with fear. People said healing takes time. They rarely mentioned that time itself can feel hostile. Then came Rachel Holloway. She had met him at a veterans fundraiser in Bozeman. She wore denim, no jewelry, hair tied back, boots muddy from the family ranch. She laughed easily and never once thanked him for service in the careful tone strangers used when they wanted credit for kindness. She asked Titan's name before she asked Caleb's. That had mattered. She listened when he spoke little. She never startled when he scanned exits. On their third date, she brought steaks for Titan and said, I figured I should win over the important one first. He had laughed for the first time in months. When she invited him to stay at the Holloway Ranch for a weekend, the mountains were green and endless. Wind moved across pasture grass like water. Horses turned in the distance. The barn smelled of cedar and hay. For the first time since war, Caleb felt there might be room enough somewhere to set his burdens down. He married her 2 years later beneath cottonwoods by the creek. Titan wore a blue collar and sat through the ceremony like an officer tolerating civilians. Caleb smiled at the memory, then lost it just as fast, because memory did not come alone. It brought the rest. Victor Holloway shaking his hand too long and saying, "Work hard here and you'll always have a place." The phrase sounded generous then. Later he understood it was ownership language. A place, not a share, not a future. A place. The truck hit black ice and slid sideways. Caleb corrected instinctively. Titan braced, then relaxed. "Still got it," Caleb muttered. But a mile later they rounded a bend and saw red emergency lights reflecting off snow. A pickup had gone through a guardrail and tipped nose down into the ditch. Steam rose from the hood. 2 state troopers moved around it. Caleb's chest locked. Flashing lights, metal bent at angles, steam in cold air. For one blinding instant it was not Idaho. It was another road, another wrecked vehicle, another smell. He slammed the brakes and stopped hard on the shoulder. Breathing vanished. Hands numb. Vision narrowing. Not here. Not now. He shoved the door open to stumble into the snow. Titan blocked him. The dog leaped across the bench seat and planted both front paws against Caleb's chest, forcing him backward into the cab. Then Titan pressed his whole weight forward, muzzle under Caleb's chin, steady eyes inches away. Caleb shook violently. Titan did not move. "Look at me," Caleb whispered to himself, but he was already looking at the dog. Brown eyes, warm breath, snow melting on fur, leather collar smell, truck heater rattling. One thing at a time. Titan nudged Caleb's hand until fingers found the dog's neck. Caleb counted breaths against the fur. 1, 2, 3. The past loosened. Outside, the troopers waved traffic around the wreck. Inside the truck, Titan stayed braced until Caleb could speak clearly again. "Good boy," Caleb said, voice cracked. "Good boy." Titan licked his wrist once and returned to the passenger seat as though nothing unusual had happened. Caleb sat another minute. Then he drove on. Night came early in the mountains. The sky darkened to indigo behind black timber ridges. Snow eased at last, leaving stars in scattered breaks above. The road narrowed, then narrowed again. He followed the map onto County Road 18, then a gravel route half buried in drifted snow. No houses, no mailboxes, no lights. Just forest, rock, and the long breathing silence of winter country. Titan sat forward now, alert in a new way. He knew this place. Caleb felt it before he admitted it. The dog's ears tracked turns before they came. At a fork hidden under snow, Titan barked once and stared left. Caleb turned left. Another mile. Then another. The road ended at a rusted cattle gate hanging crooked between cedar posts. Beyond it stretched a narrow lane disappearing into dark pines. Titan was already whining low in his throat. Excitement. Recognition. Caleb killed the engine. Silence rushed in. He stepped out into knee-deep snow and cold sharp enough to sting teeth. The gate chain had long since broken. He pushed it open. The hinges screamed into the night. Somewhere beyond the trees, unseen in moonlight and shadow, a shape waited. Titan surged forward into the lane, then stopped and looked back once, as if asking whether Caleb was finally ready. Caleb tightened his coat, picked up the iron key, and followed the dog into the dark. The lane was narrow and nearly swallowed by snow. Pine branches bowed low under white weight, brushing his shoulders as he passed. Moonlight filtered through the trees in thin silver strips that made the path look broken into pieces. Titan moved ahead with complete certainty. No hesitation, no sniffing for direction. He knew where he was going. Caleb's boots sank deep with each step. The cold bit through leather and into his toes. His breath came hard in the stillness. Behind them, the open gate groaned once in the wind, then was quiet again. The farther they went, the less the modern world seemed to exist. No power lines, no tire tracks, no glow from distant towns, only forest, frozen air, and the rhythmic sound of Titan pushing through snowdrifts. Then the trees opened. Caleb stopped. A valley spread before him under moonlight, cupped between dark ridges. Snow-covered pasture rolled downward in long, pale curves. At the center stood a farmhouse and several outbuildings, silent and black against the white land. The place was larger than he expected, older too. The farmhouse had 2 stories, cedar siding silvered by age, wide porch wrapped around the front, stone chimney rising stout and straight through the roofline. A barn stood farther back, roof steep and heavy with snow. Beyond that, he could make out the shape of a grain shed leaning slightly east. No lights anywhere. Yet nothing looked abandoned. Fence lines still stood. Paths had been cleared once recently enough to remain visible under fresh snowfall. The place felt asleep, not dead. Titan barked once and sprinted downhill. "Titan!" The dog ignored him and raced straight toward the house, circling the porch, then cutting across the yard toward the grain shed. Caleb hurried after him, sliding once on hidden ice. The grain shed door hung half open. One hinge squealed in the wind. Inside, moonlight entered through roof slats and broken boards, striping the packed dirt floor. Titan was already digging near the rear wall. Snow and dust flew behind him. His paws struck wood, not dirt. Caleb knelt beside him and brushed away loose debris. Beneath the surface lay old planks darkened by age and moisture. A trapdoor. The dog's claws had found an iron ring set flush into the boards. Caleb stared at it. The key in his hand suddenly felt heavier. He shoved aside more debris, gripped the ring, and pulled. The door resisted. He pulled harder. Wood broke free with a sucking sound and rose several inches. Cold, stale air rolled upward, carrying scents of earth, cedar oil, and metal long sealed away. A ladder descended into darkness. Titan whined softly, tail moving low. "You knew," Caleb murmured. The dog looked at him as if that had never been in doubt. Caleb took the flashlight from his truck bag, thumbed it on, and aimed the beam downward. Concrete walls. Dry. Well built. The ladder disappeared maybe 12 feet below into a chamber too large to see from above. He hesitated. Old spaces underground were not friendly to men with certain memories. Titan stepped onto the first rung and looked back. Caleb laughed once despite himself. "Fine, you first." They descended together. At the bottom, Caleb's boots touched smooth concrete. He swung the light wide. The beam found shelves, rows and rows of shelves. Metal racks lined the walls holding labeled boxes, sealed jars, tool cases, ledgers stacked in neat columns, and plastic tubs marked by year. A heavy steel cabinet stood near the back. Workbenches ran the length of one wall. A generator sat in a side alcove beside fuel drums and spare parts. This was no panic room. This was a system. Someone had built this place to last decades. Titan moved deeper into the chamber and sat beside a cedar desk. On it lay a lantern, a box of matches, and a second envelope. Caleb lit the lantern. Warm yellow light spread across the room, softening the hard edges of the underground space. Dust motes turned lazily in the glow. The envelope bore the same block handwriting. "If you made it here, sit down first." Caleb obeyed before realizing he had. The cedar chair creaked beneath him. His legs trembled from the climb, the drive, the day, the shock of all this. Titan lay at his feet, chin on boots. Caleb opened the letter. Nephew, if you are reading this, then either I'm gone or too old to explain things proper. Most likely both. You were not meant for small rooms or small people. I saw that early. So did the dog. If they sent you away today, good. Some doors only open after another one shuts. Before I tell you what this place is, I need you to understand why I built it. Caleb lowered the page slowly. Earl Mercer was not his uncle, but his grandfather often called everyone younger than him nephew, miss, or son depending on mood. Caleb could hear the old man's voice in every line. He turned the page, and with that came memory. Earl's actual house had stood 40 miles east of where Caleb grew up, a one-story clapboard place with sagging porch steps and wind chimes made from sockets and spoons. Caleb spent summers there while his mother worked double shifts at the diner. Earl never talked much. He taught by handing over tools. Need a nail pulled? Here's the hammer. Need wood split? Here's the maul. Need a fence fixed? Watch once, then do it wrong until you learn. He rose before daylight every day and believed weather was not an excuse but information. At 10 years old, Caleb thought the man poor. At 15, he thought him stubborn. At 25, after war, he realized Earl had simply refused to measure wealth the same way other men did. The old man also loved Titan immediately. Caleb had brought the shepherd there during his first year home, hoping country quiet might settle them both. Instead, Titan vanished every morning at dawn. Each afternoon he returned muddy, exhausted, satisfied. "Where's he going?" Caleb once asked. Earl kept sharpening a blade. "School." "What kind of school?" "The useful kind." Caleb smiled at the memory now and glanced down. Titan's tail thumped once. You and him had secrets. Titan closed his eyes. He kept reading. You married into people who polish what they own and neglect what they owe. I watched that father of hers look at you like hired labor the first Thanksgiving he invited me. You looked tired that day. You were smiling too hard. The dog watched every door in the house. I knew enough, so I started moving things. Caleb frowned. Moving what? He turned to the next page. Around him, the chamber seemed to grow quieter. Lantern light flickered across shelves of boxes labeled by years stretching back further than he expected. What had Earl been storing all this time? Titan rose suddenly and padded toward the far steel cabinet. He touched it once with his nose, then looked back. The cabinet door bore a keyhole, same size as the iron key. Caleb stood slowly. His pulse quickened. Easy, he said, though he wasn't sure whether he meant himself or the dog. He crossed the room, inserted the key, turned it. The lock released with a heavy metallic clunk that echoed off concrete walls. He opened the cabinet doors. Inside were leather binders, stacks of sealed folders, rolled survey maps tied with twine, and 3 small lockboxes. On the middle shelf sat a handwritten card. For when you're ready to know what they missed. Caleb exhaled. The Holloways thought they had taken everything from him. Yet somewhere in the mountains, hidden beneath snow and timber, his grandfather had been preparing another answer entirely. Titan stood beside him, shoulder pressing Caleb's knee. Warm, solid, certain. For the first time since the courthouse, the shame began to loosen. In its place came something sharper. Possibility. Outside, wind moved across the valley rooflines in a long, low hush. Deep beneath the frozen farm, Caleb Mercer reached for the first binder and opened it. The cover was thick black leather, edges worn smooth by years' amours of handling. Inside, every page was protected in clear sleeves. Typed documents, notarized seals, county stamps, signatures in blue ink, property deeds. Caleb turned one page, then another. Parcel maps spread across the valley and surrounding ridgelines, acreage numbers, water access rights, timber use restrictions, mineral surveys, easements connecting old roads no one used anymore, Every tract listed under one legal entity: Mercer Agricultural Trust, trustee of record, Earl Joseph Mercer. Successor beneficiary: Caleb Thomas Mercer. Caleb stopped breathing for a moment. His own full name stared back at him in formal type. He had never signed anything, never discussed a trust, never even heard the words spoken by Earl. Titan sat beside him quietly, watching. Caleb turned more pages. Tax payments had been made on time for 23 consecutive years. Insurance policies renewed. Boundary disputes settled. Maintenance contracts paid to local contractors. Someone had been caring for this place long after Earl's death. He reached for another binder. This one held financial statements, investment accounts, lease income from hay production on lower fields, royalty checks from patented drought-resistant seed strains licensed to agricultural companies in 3 states, amounts too large for his tired brain to process quickly. Then he found the summary sheet clipped to the front. Estimated trust value, previous fiscal year, $9,412,680.44. He laughed once. It came out sounding almost angry. Titan lifted his head. "Yeah," Caleb said softly. "That's about right." He sat back in the cedar chair and rubbed both hands over his face. That morning he had walked out of court with $2. Now he was underground, beneath a hidden mountain farm worth more money than he had ever imagined seeing in one place. Shock should have felt good. Instead, it felt complicated. Because with every page he turned, another truth sharpened beside it. The Holloways had not merely beaten him, they had studied how to beat him. He opened the 3rd binder. Legal filings from the divorce, copies of motions, asset declarations, claims regarding Caleb's emotional instability, statements portraying him as unreliable due to PTSD, recommendations that Rachel required protection from his unpredictability. His jaw tightened. Some of the language had come directly from private conversations held in kitchens, bedrooms, truck rides, moments when he had trusted the wrong people with the truth of what war had left inside him. The nightmares, the panic in crowds, the way fireworks on the 4th of July made him sweat through shirts. Rachel knew those things. Victor knew those things because Rachel told him. Then attorneys polished those wounds into weapons. Titan rose and pressed his muzzle under Caleb's forearm, grounding again. Caleb exhaled slowly. "You always knew, didn't you?" Titan blinked. The dog had disliked Victor Holloway from the first day. Caleb remembered it clearly now. Victor's ranch house had hosted Sunday dinners with expensive china and louder opinions. Men talked cattle prices and land values, while women cleared plates no one offered to carry. Caleb used to sit at the far end, half guest, half employee. Titan was once ordered outside. The dog refused. Victor slapped the table. "That animal isn't family." Titan did not growl. He simply moved closer to Caleb's chair and lay across Caleb's boots. Rachel laughed then, trying to smooth it over. "He's protective, Dad," Victor replied without humor. "Then he needs retraining." Earl Mercer had been there that night. He said nothing during dinner, but while leaving he knelt beside Titan on the porch, scratched behind one ear, and murmured just loud enough for Caleb to hear, "Trust the dog before the room." At the time, Caleb thought it was one of the old man's strange sayings. Now it sounded like warning. He returned to the documents. The final folder contained letters from Earl. Dozens of them, dated over years, most unopened, each marked with simple instructions. Open if you are broke. Open if you are ashamed. Open if she leaves. Open if you forget who you are. Caleb stared at them in silence. The old man had planned not just for money, but for pain. He selected the one on top. Open if you forget who you are. Inside was a single page. If you are reading this, then someone convinced you that usefulness and worth are the same thing. They are not. A mule is useful. A shovel is useful. Men are more than use. You were a boy who shared food before being asked, worked hard without witnesses, and came home carrying ghosts, but still tried to be gentle. That is who you are. Anything else is weather. Caleb lowered the paper. The lantern flame blurred. He looked away until his eyes steadied. Titan placed one paw on Caleb's boot. "Don't start," Caleb muttered, voice rough. "You know I hate crying." Titan thumped his tail once. Hours passed without his noticing. He moved through records, maps, notes, account numbers, instructions for generators, names of lawyers, names of accountants, names of 2 caretakers still employed by the trust. One name appeared often. Dana Brooks, Esquire, retained counsel. A number was listed beside it. He checked his phone. No signal underground. Of course. He climbed the ladder with Titan following close. Outside, dawn was beginning to silver the eastern ridge. Snow clouds had broken apart. The farmhouse and fields glowed blue-white in early light. The valley was breathtaking. Terraces stepped down toward a frozen creek. Orchard rows stood dark and orderly beneath snow. Fence lines ran straight as rifle sights. Beyond them rose mountains layered in pale distance. Someone had loved this place enough to keep it alive unseen. Caleb walked to the porch. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of cedar, iron stove ash, and old soap. Furniture stood covered in sheets. A woodpile waited beside the hearth. In the kitchen pantry, he found canned goods dated within 6 months. Maintained. Still. He set a fire in the stove by instinct. Titan circled once and lay near the warmth. Caleb found a landline phone mounted in the hall. He picked it up. Dial tone. He called the number listed for Dana Brooks. A woman answered on the second ring. "Brooks Legal. This is Caleb Mercer." Silence. Then calm and immediate. "Mr. Mercer, I've been expecting your call for 8 years." Caleb straightened. "I'm sorry?" "I represented Earl Mercer. If you are calling from the valley, then events unfolded the way he believed they eventually would." Caleb looked out the frosted window toward the grain shed. "He left me all this." "Yes." "Why?" Another pause. "Because he did not trust the Holloways, and because he trusted you more than you trusted yourself." Caleb sank into a kitchen chair. "I just lost everything in court yesterday." "No," Dana Brooks said evenly. "You lost what they controlled. Those are not the same thing." He almost laughed. "What do I do now? First, eat something. Second, sleep. Third, do not sign another paper or speak to the Holloways directly. I'll be there by afternoon." "You're in Idaho?" "I'm in Missoula. 4 hours if roads behave." "They won't. They rarely do." She hung up. Caleb sat in the quiet kitchen with the receiver still in hand. Titan watched him from beside the stove. "You hear that?" Caleb said. "Apparently we're rich." Titan yawned. By noon, the sun broke through fully. Caleb walked the property. The lower barn housed maintained tractors under tarps. The machine shed held tools cleaner than his own. The orchard trees had been pruned with professional care. Feed bins were full, though no livestock remained. At the creek crossing, he found fresh tire tracks. Not his. Large truck. Recent. His shoulders tightened. Someone else had been here. Titan sniffed the tracks, hackles rising slightly. They followed them only to the gate, where the vehicle had turned around and left. Caleb studied the pattern. Heavy-duty tires. Expensive tread. Not county workers. Not random hunters. He knew trucks like that. Victor Holloway owned 3. The warmth of the morning thinned instantly. How much did Victor know? Had he known about the valley already? Was that why the divorce became so aggressive? Why attorneys pushed so hard to strip Caleb clean before turning him loose? Not because Caleb was worthless. because someone suspected he was standing near something valuable. Titan let out a low warning sound toward the road. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's neck. "All right," he said quietly. "So the ambush isn't over." Wind moved across the open pasture, carrying glittering snow from fence rails. Far below, unseen from town and hidden by mountains, the Mercer Valley waited, beautiful, remote, and suddenly dangerous. By late afternoon, a dark SUV appeared at the gate and climbed the lane. Dana Brooks stepped out wearing boots, wool coat, and the expression of a woman who had little patience for nonsense and less fear of wealthy men. She looked at Caleb once, then at Titan. "You look tired," she said. "I've had a week. You've had a war and a lawsuit. We'll sort the smaller one first." She handed him a folder. Inside was a copy of an emergency filing submitted that morning. Petition for review of newly discovered marital assets, filed by counsel for Rachel Holloway. Caleb looked up slowly. They moved fast. Dana's mouth hardened. They moved before dawn. Titan stood. The dog stared down the road where the valley lane disappeared into timber. Somewhere beyond those trees, the Holloways were coming back, and this time they knew exactly what they wanted. The valley seemed to hear it too. Wind moved slower across the pasture grass. The pines along the ridge stood dark and listening. Even the creek below the orchard sounded sharper, as if the ice-covered water had changed its tone. Dana Brooks closed the SUV door and looked over the land with the quick measuring eyes of someone trained to assess risk before beauty. "How many entrances?" she asked. "Main lane at the gate," Caleb said. "Service road behind the barn, maybe washed out. Old trail East Ridge, but snowed in." She nodded once. "And how many ways to hide assets here?" He almost smiled. "You lawyers always know how to romance a place." "I know how greedy people think," she replied. "That's close enough." Titan stood beside Caleb, ears forward, watching the tree line. Dana crouched and let the dog smell the back of her hand. Titan did, then stepped away. "That's approval?" she asked. "That's probation." She stood. "Good enough." They went inside the farmhouse. Dana spread folders across the kitchen table beneath the window where pale afternoon light pooled over old pine boards. She moved with organized speed, stacking petitions, trust summaries, land maps, and court filings into clean lines. Caleb brewed coffee in an enamel pot he found in the pantry. The smell filled the room and made the house feel occupied for the first time in years. Titan lay by the stove but did not sleep. Every few minutes, one ear lifted toward the road. Dana read silently for 10 straight minutes. Then she looked up. Victor Holloway filed claiming the trust was concealed marital property. It wasn't. I know that. Earl funded it before your marriage. Beneficiary designation doesn't equal shared ownership. Then why file? To pressure you. She tapped the page. He doesn't need to win. He needs to make you tired, frightened, uncertain, and expensive. Caleb leaned against the counter. That strategy sounds familiar. Dana met his eyes. Because it worked before. The words landed clean and hard. Caleb looked away first. She softened a degree. That wasn't an insult. I know. Good. Because shame is useful to people like Victor. Don't hand him any more. Titan rose and crossed the room, pressing his head briefly into Caleb's hip. Dana noticed. He does that often? When I start drifting. Into what? He took a breath. Past things. Bad places. She nodded as if discussing weather. Then listened to the dog. By dusk, clouds returned. Snow began again in thin diagonal threads. Dana stayed to review the underground records while Caleb hauled wood from the side shed. Chopping cold air with an armload against his chest felt honest in a way paperwork never would. Titan trotted beside him, scanning constantly. Inside, they ate canned stew warmed on the stove. Donna removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Earl Mercer was a dangerous man. Caleb frowned. He raised chickens and fixed tractors. He also built a multi-million-dollar trust in secret, documented every legal defense in advance, retained counsel across state lines, and predicted your in-laws with surgical accuracy. She lifted one of Earl's letters. That's strategy. Caleb looked toward the floorboards beneath which the vault rested. He never said any of it. The most serious people rarely announce themselves. Titan let out a low rumble. All three went still. Headlights moved faintly through the front windows. Not one set. 2. They climbed the lane slowly through falling snow. Dana stood. Did you invite anyone? No. Caleb's body changed before thought caught up. Back straight. Breathing lower, eyes sharpening. The old operational instincts slid into place like tools returning to a hand. Titan moved to the front door, silent now, muscles taut. The vehicles stopped outside. Truck doors slammed. Male voices. Laughter. Caleb extinguished the kitchen light with one motion. Darkness swallowed the room except for stove glow. Dana whispered, "Sheriff?" "Too many boots." A fist pounded the front door. "Mr. Mercer," a voice called. "County Records Inquiry." Caleb looked through the side curtain. 2 lifted pickups, 4 men in heavy coats. One held a clipboard. Another carried no clipboard and stood like hired muscle. Dana's jaw tightened. "Records Inquiry at night in a storm. Charming." The pounding came again. "Open up!" Titan barked once, explosive enough to shake the hallway. Silence followed. Then the man outside tried the knob. Locked. Dana whispered, "We call the sheriff." Caleb already had his phone out. No signal. He looked at her, she checked hers. Nothing. The valley walls blocked reception and weather. Outside, someone cursed. Boots crunched around the porch. "They're checking windows," Caleb said. Dana moved fast, gathering folders from the table. "Where's the safest room?" "Below." They descended into the vault with lantern light and closed the hatch above them. The underground silence magnified every sound from overhead. Footsteps on wood floor. A chair overturned. Cabinet doors opening. Men shouting room to room. Titan stood at the base of the ladder, staring upward, every nerve fixed on the house above. Caleb's pulse hammered, but not with helplessness this time. With readiness. Dana whispered, "If they find the hatch?" "They won't." "How can you know?" Titan growled. "That's how." Minutes passed. Then the house fell quiet. Too quiet. Caleb knew that kind of quiet. The pause before escalation. He motioned for stillness. A scraping sound came from above the grain shed direction. Not the house, outside. Titan whipped toward the far wall. Caleb understood suddenly. "They're searching the outbuildings." Dana looked at the shelves, the binders, the cabinet. "The shed." He was already moving. They climbed the ladder into darkness. Snow blew through broken planks of the grain shed. Lantern light was hidden. Caleb crouched low and listened. Voices nearby. "Nothing in the house." "Check the shed again." Titan's lip curled. Caleb placed one hand on the dog's shoulder. "Wait." The outer door creaked wider. A flashlight beam sliced across the floor. Another followed. 2 men entered. Titan launched before either took a second step. A blur of muscle and controlled force. One man yelped and crashed backward into feed bins. The second dropped his flashlight as Titan drove him into the wall hard enough to knock the air from him. Caleb surged from cover, grabbed the first man's wrist, twisted the crowbar free, and kicked it aside. "Stay down." The command came out with battlefield authority neither man questioned. Outside, another voice shouted. Donna blew a sheriff's whistle she had found hanging in the farmhouse mudroom. The shrill blast cut through the valley like gunfire. Truck engines roared instantly, cowards choosing speed over loyalty. Tires spun on snow. By the time Caleb dragged the stunned men outside, the pickups were fishtailing down the lane. One of the men groaned. "We were just asked to look around." "By who?" No answer. Titan stood over him, silent and terrifying. The man changed his mind. Victor Holloway's ranch manager. Dana exhaled through her nose. "Of course." Distant sirens finally echoed from beyond the ridge. Someone in town must have heard engines or seen the trucks pass. Snow thickened again, softening everything. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later with deputies and a tired face. He knew Victor Holloway. He knew Caleb. He knew exactly how unpleasant this would become. Statements were taken. The two men were loaded into cruisers. No one said Victor's name aloud except Dinah, who did so repeatedly and with precision. When the vehicles finally left, the valley returned to silence. Caleb stood on the porch, breath steaming, adrenaline draining from his hands. Titan sat beside him. Dana joined them with 3 mugs of reheated coffee. She handed one to Caleb. "You all right?" He considered the truth. "I'm awake." "That'll do for tonight." He looked down at Titan. The dog's shoulder carried a shallow scrape from colliding with wood in the shed. Caleb touched it gently. "You idiot hero." Titan leaned harder into his leg. Dana stared into the snow-dark lane. "They won't stop because of one bad night." "I know. They'll come with paper next time. Inspectors, claims, liens, stories." Caleb sipped hot bitter coffee and watched the ridge disappear into storm. Then he said something he had not believed that morning. "Let them come." The words surprised him with their steadiness. He was no longer standing in a courthouse holding $2. He was on ground his blood had prepared for him, beside the dog who had found the way back. Inside the house, beneath the floor, waited proof. Outside, the storm deepened, and for the first time in years, Caleb Mercer did not feel cornered. He felt defended. Morning came pale and clean after the storm. The valley glittered beneath new snow. Fence rails wore white caps. The orchard branches held ice like glass fingers. Smoke rose straight from the farmhouse chimney into windless blue air. Caleb woke in a downstairs bedroom beneath 2 heavy quilts that smelled faintly of cedar and soap. For a moment he did not know where he was. Then he heard claws crossing old hardwood. Titan nudged the bedroom door open and walked in carrying 1 boot in his mouth. Caleb laughed before he was fully awake. "You're getting bossy." Titan dropped the boot at the bedside and wagged once. The scrape on the dog's shoulder looked clean. Caleb checked it carefully, then scratched behind the ears the way Titan tolerated only from him. Downstairs, Dana Brooks stood at the stove in wool socks and a thermal shirt, reading documents while flipping bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "I hope you like strong coffee," she said without looking up. "I like surviving." "Then we're aligned." They ate in the kitchen while sunlight widened across the table. Titan lay between them, hopeful but dignified. Dana slid a folder toward Caleb. "I made calls before dawn from the ridge where signal exists." "Bad news?" "Predictable news. Victor Holloway denies involvement. Claims the men came independently after hearing rumors." Caleb snorted. "Of course." He also filed for emergency access to inspect trust records. "Denied?" "For now." She sipped coffee. "But pressure is building. The county assessor wants updated valuations. State agriculture wants licensing records. Once money appears, institutions suddenly become curious." Caleb looked out the window at the silent fields. This place stayed hidden for years. Because Earl Mercer wanted it hidden. Now you exist on paper. She folded her hands. "Which means we need to understand everything before others pretend to understand it, for you." They spent the next hours underground. The vault no longer felt eerie. In daylight and purpose, it became something else. A command center built by a patient man who believed preparation was a form of love. Dana reviewed legal binders with quick, precise focus. Caleb sorted maps and maintenance ledgers. Titan moved shelf to shelf, occasionally pausing at certain boxes as if memory tugged at him. One steel drawer held old photographs. Earl standing beside rows of wheat. Earl shaking hands with scientists in dusty jackets. A younger Caleb at age 12 holding a fish nearly as long as his leg. Titan as a lanky adolescent pup, oversized paws planted proudly on a porch step. Caleb smiled. I thought he only came here a few times. Dana glanced over. He came enough to remember. Another drawer contained journals, not diaries, field books, soil moisture logs, seed trial results, irrigation timing, notes in Earl's block handwriting that grew shakier only in final years. Then Caleb found a leather notebook separate from the rest. Inside were personal entries. Sparse, rare, honest. June 14th. Caleb came back from overseas. Walks like a man still hearing sounds no one else hears. August 2nd. Dog sleeps against his bedroom door. Smart animal. November 9th. Rachel seems kind. Hope I'm wrong about her father. March 17th. Caleb smiled today while fixing the tractor. First real one I've seen. Caleb closed the notebook and stared at the cover. Dana pretended not to notice the moisture in his eyes. Take breaks, she said quietly. He nodded. Titan came and rested his chin on Caleb's knee. By noon, they found the maintenance trust records. 2 names repeated through decades. Harold Finch, grounds and livestock. Miriam Finch, orchard and house care. Payments continued even after Earl's death. Where are they now? Caleb asked. Dana checked later records. Still contracted. Address listed 10 miles south. You think they know I'm here? Before she could answer, Titan barked sharply toward the ceiling. A vehicle approached. They emerged from the vault to see an old green flatbed truck climbing the lane. An elderly man drove. Beside him sat a woman in a red coat and knit hat. The truck stopped by the porch. The man stepped out slowly, lean and weathered as fence wire. The woman followed carrying a casserole dish wrapped in towels. Neither looked surprised to see Caleb. The man removed his cap. You're taller than Earl guessed. Caleb blinked. Harold Finch? That depends who's asking. Caleb Mercer. Harold nodded once. Then yes. Miriam Finch came forward and hugged Caleb before he could prepare for it. You look tired, she said. That runs in your family. She handed him the dish. Chicken pie. Men think better after food. Titan trotted to Harold, who scratched the dog's chest expertly. Well now, Harold said. Still remember manners, do you? Titan leaned harder. Caleb stared. You know him. Raised him half his puppyhood, Harold said. Earl said the dog had work ahead. The old man looked around the valley. Didn't think it would be this week, though. They gathered in the kitchen. Harold and Miriam spoke plainly, the way people do when they've outlived the need for performance. They had managed the property for 20 years, maintained roads, rotated crops, handled licensing shipments, kept taxes current through Dana, told no one anything. Why? Caleb asked. Harold shrugged. Because Earl asked. Miriam added, and because your grandfather knew the difference between secrecy and privacy. Harold's face hardened when Victor Holloway's name came up. That man sent surveyors twice over the years, claimed he was researching adjacent land. We sent them home. Why didn't anyone tell me? Harold studied him. Because back then you were trying to survive. Earl said no man can carry healing and inheritance at the same time. The room went quiet. Caleb looked down at his hands. There were years after war when getting through a grocery store was a victory. Years when marriage felt like scaffolding holding him upright. Years when he would have sold anything simply to feel normal. Earl had known that. So he waited. Dana asked the practical question. What now? Harold answered first. Now folks will come sniffing. County men, Holloway men, curious neighbors, maybe reporters if greed gets colorful. Miriam set plates on the table. So first, eat. That afternoon, Harold took Caleb through the barns. The main equipment shed held tractors maintained better than many dealerships kept theirs. Fuel logs were exact. Tools hung in outlines painted on pegboard. Earl hated searching for tools, Harold said. The livestock barn stood mostly empty except for 2 horses wintering in side stalls and a cluster of hens who regarded everyone suspiciously. Can't run a place without creatures judging you, Harold remarked. Caleb smiled more than once. Then they crossed to the eastern ridge. From there, the whole valley opened beneath them. Fields terraced like steps, creek winding silver, farmhouse smoke rising steady. Titan bounded ahead through powder like a younger dog. Harold planted his cane and looked sideways at Caleb. You still wake fast? Caleb knew what he meant. Sometimes. Still sit facing doors? Usually. Still ashamed of things your nervous system does before your mind votes? Caleb let out a slow breath. Working on that one. Harold nodded. Good. Keep working. They stood in silence a while. Then Harold said, Earl was Army in Korea. Came back mean at noises and gentle with animals. Didn't have names for much back then. Just said certain weather stayed inside a man. Caleb swallowed. Did it ever leave him? No. Harold looked across the valley. But it quit owning him. Titan returned and pressed against Caleb's leg. Warm weight. Familiar promise. Below them, Dana and Miriam moved around the porch carrying boxes of records into sunlight for sorting. A home in motion. Not hidden now. Becoming. Near sunset, Dana's phone caught signal on the ridge. She listened, expression tightening. What is it? Caleb asked. She ended the call. Victor's escalated. He filed criminal complaints alleging trespass and theft of trust property. Caleb stared. Against who? You. Harold laughed so hard he coughed. Miriam rolled her eyes. Dana did not smile. He wants you dragged into town, confused, defensive, back on his ground. Caleb looked toward the distant road leading out of the valley. The old feeling tried to rise. Chest tightness, dread, that certainty of being outmatched. Titan sensed it instantly and leaned against his thigh. Caleb steadied. Then something changed. He was not standing in a courthouse anymore. He was on land prepared for him by people who had already chosen his side. Then we go to town, he said. Dana raised an eyebrow. You sure? No. He looked at Titan. But I'm not going alone. The dog's ears lifted. Wind crossed the ridge, carrying pine scent and cold. Below them, the first porch light came on in the farmhouse. For years, roads had led Caleb Mercer toward places that used him. Tomorrow, for the first time, he would take one back with purpose. Night settled over the valley in slow blue layers. The porch light cast a warm circle onto fresh snow. Beyond it, the fields faded into silver darkness, then into the black shoulders of the mountains. Wind moved softly through the orchard rows, making the bare branches click like old bones. Inside the farmhouse, wood heat gathered in the kitchen. Miriam Finch kneaded biscuit dough with practiced hands. Harold cleaned his glasses with the corner of a dish towel. Dana Brooks spread legal papers across the table one last time before stacking them neatly and closing the folder. Titan slept near the stove, but not deeply. His ears twitched at every shift of floorboard, every gust outside, every distant coyote call. Caleb stood at the sink staring into the dark window above it. His reflection looked older than he remembered, less broken than last week, more tired than he would admit. You planning to wash that same cup all night? Miriam asked. He looked down. He had been holding the dry mug under running water. He shut the tap and smiled faintly. Habit? From war or marriage? Hard to separate sometimes. Harold barked a laugh. Dana looked at Caleb over the rim of her tea. Tomorrow you drive into town, we answer nonsense with facts, and we remind the county that legal filings are not magic spells. Simple enough. It never is, she said. But simple is a good place to start. Caleb nodded. Titan rose, crossed the room, and leaned his shoulder into Caleb's leg. The dog had done that more often lately, as if checking that the man was still present. Caleb scratched behind Titan's ears. I'm here. Titan sighed and returned to the stove. Caleb did not sleep long. He woke at 2:14 a.m. to the old familiar rush, heart pounding, lungs tight, body convinced something terrible had just happened, though the room was still and dark. For one disorienting second, he thought he was back in a plywood barracks overseas. Then claws clicked once on hardwood. Titan's head appeared in the doorway. The dog crossed to the bed, placed both front paws gently on the mattress, and held Caleb's gaze. Brown eyes, steady breath, farmhouse ceiling above, wind outside, quilt over legs, no danger. Caleb reached out and gripped the thick fur around Titan's neck. The tremor passed. Sorry, he whispered. Titan licked his wrist once, then lay beside the bed until dawn. They left just after sunrise. The truck tires crunched over frozen snow as Caleb drove down the lane. Titan rode in the passenger seat, upright and alert. Dana followed in her SUV. Harold and Miriam stayed behind to manage the farm. At the gate, Caleb glanced back once. Smoke rose from the chimney. Light struck the upper field's gold. Home. The word startled him. He kept driving. The road into town wound through forest, crossed a narrow steel bridge, then opened into wide ranch country where barns sat low against the wind and cattle clustered near feed lines. As Harland County appeared ahead, Caleb felt his chest tighten. Not panic. Anticipation sharpened by old memories. This town knew one version of him, the damaged veteran, the outsider who married up, the man publicly handed $2. Today, they would meet another. Titan sensed the shift and rested one paw lightly on Caleb's thigh. Grounding. Caleb exhaled. Still on duty, huh? Titan looked forward. Always. The county administrative building stood beside the courthouse where everything had broken open days earlier. Same brick walls, same flag snapping overhead, same steps iced at the edges, different man climbing them. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. Clerks moved behind counters. Boots squeaked on tile. The smell of paper and copier toner hung in warm air. Several people recognized Caleb immediately. Their eyes flicked to Titan, then back to Caleb. Whispers began before he reached the front desk. Dana took point. We're here regarding complaint filings against Caleb Mercer. The clerk, a thin woman named Sharon who once bought raffle tickets from Caleb for a volunteer fire fundraiser, adjusted her glasses nervously. There have been several filings. By whom? She glanced down. Holloway Agricultural Holdings. Of course, Dana said. Sharon lowered her voice. They requested temporary seizure of trust records pending fraud review. Caleb stared. Seizure? Dana's expression never changed. Denied? For now, but there's a hearing request this afternoon. Convenient. Sharon looked apologetic. Mr. Holloway has been making calls. Caleb almost laughed. Victor Holloway had mistaken noise for power his entire life. Dana leaned on the counter. We'll need copies of everything. Sharon nodded gratefully, relieved to deal with competence. As papers printed, footsteps approached behind them. Caleb knew the rhythm before turning. Victor Holloway wore a camel overcoat and the kind of confidence money mistakes for character. Rachel walked beside him in dark sunglasses, though they were indoors. Two men from a larger law firm followed carrying leather briefcases. Victor smiled like a man arriving at his own event. Well, he said, the Valley Ghost came to town. Titan stood immediately. No bark, no growl, just a silent rise that changed the temperature around them. Victor's smile thinned. Rachel removed her sunglasses. She looked at Caleb fully for the first time since court. "You found something," she said quietly. "I found what was mine." Her jaw tightened. Victor chuckled. "Nothing is yours until a judge says so." Dana turned. "That explains why you keep renting morality from attorneys." The larger lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Victor ignored her. "To be clear," he said to Caleb, "that trust was concealed while you were married. Rachel is entitled to review." "Rachel knew I had nothing," Caleb said. "You made sure of that." Victor stepped closer. "I made sure my daughter wasn't tied to a man who mistakes labor for ownership." The old insult might once have landed. Now it simply clarified him. Caleb looked at the man calmly. "You mistook ownership for worth." For the first time, Victor's eyes hardened. Rachel spoke quickly, low enough for only Caleb to hear. "You should have just taken the money and disappeared." Caleb glanced at her. "Which money? The $2 or the years?" She flinched. Titan moved half a step closer to Caleb's leg. Dana accepted the copied filings from Sharon. "We'll see you at the hearing." Victor smiled again. "I'm counting on it." The hearing room was smaller than the courtroom where Caleb had been humiliated. Only 20 seats. Wood paneling, one judge's bench, a clock that ticked too loudly. Word still spread fast. By 1 o'clock, most seats were filled. Farmers, town employees, curious retirees, people pretending errands. Judge Eleanor Price entered and looked mildly irritated to see everyone again. "Mr. Holloway," she said dryly, "you appear unable to stay retired." Victor's counsel argued first. They spoke of undisclosed wealth, suspicious timing, possible marital concealment, beneficiary enrichment, equitable review. Long words arranged to sound inevitable. Then Dana rose. She laid one binder on the table, then another, then another. Trust formation documents dated 11 years before Caleb's marriage. Tax records proving independent status. Beneficiary designation fixed long before Rachel Holloway ever met Caleb Mercer. Maintenance contracts, royalties, agricultural patents. Judge Price reviewed the first pages and removed her glasses. "Counselor," she said to Victor's attorney, "did you read any of this before filing?" The room went still. The attorney hesitated. "We had concerns requiring inquiry. You had ambition requiring stationery." A ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the benches. Victor's face darkened. Judge Price continued. "This trust is separate property beyond marital claim based on documents currently before me." She stamped the petition. Denied. Then looked directly at Victor. "Further frivolous filings may result in sanctions." The gavel struck once. Done. Caleb sat motionless. He had spent years believing rooms like this could only strip things away. Today one had returned something invisible. Standing. Outside, the crowd spilled onto courthouse steps, buzzing with talk. Victor stormed toward his truck. Rachel paused near Caleb. Snow drifted lightly between them. "You think this makes you a winner?" she asked. "No," Caleb said. "I think it makes me free." She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left she could take that he still wanted. She walked away. Donna joined him, tucking papers into her bag. "Well," she said, "that was satisfying." Titan sat between them, calm as carved stone. Several townspeople approached hesitantly. The mechanic from Chapter 1 shook Caleb's hand. "Sorry about before." Caleb nodded. A ranch wife bent to pet Titan. "He's beautiful." "He knows," Dana said. More people gathered. Questions started. About the valley. About Earl Mercer. About the trust. About whether Caleb would sell. He looked past them all at the mountains beyond town. "No," he said, "I'm going back there." Because the real story was not in this courthouse. It was waiting in the fields, And for the first time, Harlan County watched Caleb Mercer leave town not as a defeated man, but as the owner of something no one had known existed. Snow followed them out of town in light drifting flakes. Caleb drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near Titan's shoulder. The dog sat upright in the passenger seat, watching the road with the solemn concentration he brought to every moving vehicle. Donna followed behind in her SUV until the highway forked. She called through the hands-free speaker. "I need to get back to Missoula, file a few things, and make Victor Holloway regret billing hours." "That sounds expensive." "For him," Caleb smiled. "Thank you." "I'm not doing charity, Mr. Mercer." "No?" "No. I'm investing in a client whose enemies are making poor decisions." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Rest tonight. Read everything Earl left. Tomorrow we talk structure, taxes, and how not to become an idiot with money." "I'll do my best." "Good. Titan sounds smarter than you, so lean on him." The line clicked off. Titan thumped his tail once against the seat. "Don't let it go to your head," Caleb said. The dog stared forward, already there. By late afternoon, they crossed the steel bridge and entered the valley lane. Sunlight had broken through clouds at last. Snowfields blazed white beneath blue sky. Pine shadows stretched long across the road. The farmhouse windows flashed gold as they approached. Miriam Finch stood on the porch holding a dish towel. Harold was splitting kindling near the woodshed with calm, economical strokes. When Caleb stepped out of the truck, the valley air hit his lungs like something cleaner than oxygen. Cold, sharp, honest. "Well?" Miriam called. "We won." Harold set down the axe. "Course you did." "That confidence would have been nice this morning," Caleb said. Harold shrugged. "Would have robbed you of growth." Miriam swatted him with the towel. Titan bounded past them toward the barn, then looped back in a sudden burst of youthful speed Caleb had not seen in months. The dog skidded in powder, barked once, and raced circles through the yard. Miriam laughed. "Looks like someone won too." Caleb watched Titan run and felt something inside him loosen another notch. After supper, Harold brought a cedar box from the pantry and placed it on the kitchen table. "Earl told us to give you this after your first court win." "My first?" Harold's eyes twinkled. He expected more than one. Caleb opened the box. Inside lay an oilskin packet tied with twine, a brass compass, and a folded note. "For the night you begin understanding." He untied the packet carefully. Inside was a thick letter written in Earl Mercer's square block handwriting. The pages smelled faintly of tobacco and machine oil. Caleb took them to the living room, where firelight moved across stone walls and Titan slept near the hearth. He sat in Earl's old chair and began to read. "Caleb, if you are reading this by firelight, then the valley has accepted you enough to warm your bones. Good. Now listen. You spent years believing people see clearly if you explain enough. They do not. Most people see only what serves them. Victor Holloway saw labor. Rachel saw rescue. Town people saw rumor. The government saw a veteran. Lawyers saw billable hours. But a man must ask a better question. Who saw you whole?" Caleb lowered the page. The house creaked softly around him. Wind touched the chimney. He continued. "I saw you first at age 8, carrying groceries for Mrs. Danner without being asked because her hands shook. At 12, you stood between two boys and a smaller one they were mocking. You lost the fight and apologized to me for tearing your shirt. At 17, you turned down a scholarship dinner because your mother's transmission failed and she needed the car fixed. At 27, you came back from war carrying damage you thought made you less than other men. Yet you still fed the neighbor's dog when no one watched. These things matter more than polished boots and acres." Caleb stared into the fire. No one had ever listed his life back to him in that way. Not achievements. Choices. He turned the page. I knew Victor Holloway the day he first shook my hand. Men tell on themselves through pressure. He squeezed too hard, looked over my shoulder while speaking, complimented my truck by naming what it was worth. Such men believe value must be measured aloud or it disappears, so I said little and watched. When you married into that house, I hoped kindness might soften them. Sometimes storms pass. Sometimes they settle in. Caleb exhaled through his nose. He remembered that first Thanksgiving Harold had mentioned. Victor boasting about expansion acreage. Rachel laughing too loudly at remarks she didn't fully like. Titan refusing to leave Caleb's side. Earl silent at the table, seeing more than anyone guessed. He read on. You think I built this valley for money? Wrong. Money was tool steel. Necessary, useful, cold. I built it for leverage against foolish people and shelter for better ones. If the Holloways treated you well, I would have died content, and this trust might have stayed quiet another generation. But if they mistook your steadiness for weakness, then I wanted a place waiting when you were done learning. Caleb's throat tightened. The old man had not been betting on failure. He had been preparing for possibility. Titan lifted his head and looked at Caleb as if sensing the change in the room. Caleb scratched behind one ear without taking eyes from the page. There was more. The dog understands roots because I taught him them. He understands gates because Harold taught him. He understands fear because he loves you. Listen carefully. A trained dog can track scent. A loyal dog tracks sorrow. When he leans on you, he is saying what pride keeps men from saying to each other. You are not alone. Caleb stopped reading. The fire blurred. He set the letter down and pressed thumb and forefinger against his eyes. Titan rose slowly, crossed the rug, and placed his chin on Caleb's knee. Yeah, Caleb whispered. I got that part. The dog stayed there, heavy, warm, certain. Later that night, Caleb took the lantern and went down into the vault alone. Rows of shelves stood silent in amber light. He opened boxes more carefully now. Photographs, seed trial notebooks, receipts from years before he was born. Then a flat metal case labeled, "For Caleb/read last." He opened it. Inside were military clippings about his unit, saved newspaper articles, and one folded page from a veterans hospital pamphlet on trauma recovery. Earl had underlined a sentence. Healing often begins when shame is witnessed without judgment. Below it, in his own handwriting, then start there. Caleb sat down on a crate. The vault, once mysterious, now felt intimate. Every drawer another conversation from a man who rarely spoke directly while alive. He laughed once through wet eyes. You stubborn old ghost. He looked around. This place had never been a hiding spot. It was a bridge, from one life to another. When he climbed back upstairs, moonlight silvered the kitchen floor. He poured water, drank deeply, and stood by the window. The valley slept under stars, barn roof bright with frost. Orchard rows lined in pale light. Titan padded beside him and sat. What if I mess it up? Caleb asked the dark glass. Titan leaned against his leg. What if I'm not what he thought? The dog huffed softly. Caleb smiled. Compelling legal argument. He looked again at the fields. For years he had let other people define him by what was damaged, useful, unstable, grateful, difficult, lucky to be tolerated. Earl Mercer had used none of those words. He had used seen. Outside, a meteor crossed the mountain sky in one brief white line. Inside, Caleb Mercer stood straighter than he had in years. Tomorrow there would be lawyers, filings, repairs, taxes, strategy. But tonight there was only this: a warm house, a faithful dog, a valley built by patient hands, and the first real sense that the life ahead of him might be larger than the one behind. That feeling lasted 3 days, 3 clear winter mornings of work, breath, and purpose. Caleb rose before sunrise with Harold Finch, and walked fence lines while frost still silvered the grass. They repaired a sagging gate near the lower creek crossing, changed hydraulic fluid in an old tractor, and cleared deadfall from the service road behind the barn. Miriam taught Caleb where Earl stored things no sane person would ever think to look. Spare lantern mantles inside flour tins, cash receipts beneath false drawer bottoms, wrenches wrapped in towels behind winter coats. "Your grandfather trusted systems," she said, "and distrusted labels." Dana called twice a day, once about banking transfers, once about Victor Holloway losing patience. "He's subpoenaing everything that moves," she said on the second call. "Let him get exercise." He hired a private investigator. Caleb glanced at Titan lying beside the porch steps. "For me?" "For the valley." He looked out across the land. Then he smiled slightly. Good luck to him. Titan had grown restless in those 3 days. He patrolled more than usual, slept lighter. Twice he woke Caleb before dawn and stood facing the front window, ears high, body still as carved wood. Nothing appeared outside, but Caleb had learned not to dismiss instincts carried in fur. On the 4th day, clouds rolled in low and heavy. By evening, sleet tapped the windows like thrown gravel. The valley narrowed into shadows and weather. Harold and Miriam drove home before the road turned bad. Donna was in Missoula filing responses. Caleb and Titan were alone. He liked the sound of that more than he would have months ago. He heated chili on the stove, ate at the kitchen table, then spent an hour in the vault reviewing seed royalty contracts he barely understood. Titan lay beside the chair, snoring softly. Around 9, the power flickered. Lights dimmed, returned, then died completely. The farmhouse fell into blackness. Wind pressed against the walls. Caleb froze for half a heartbeat. Darkness used to own him. Then Titan stood and touched his hand. Present moment. House. Storm. No threat confirmed. Caleb moved calmly to the pantry, retrieved 2 lanterns, lit them, and set one in the kitchen and one near the stairs. Warm amber circles pushed back the dark. "Generator tomorrow," he said. Titan stared toward the front hall. Then the dog growled, low, continuous. Caleb set down the matchbox. Outside, through sleet and dark, came the sound of engines. More than one. He crossed to the front window and lifted the curtain 1 inch. Headlights climbed the lane. 2 trucks. No county markings. No caution in their speed. They knew where they were going. Caleb dropped the curtain. Titan was already at the door. "Back room," Caleb said. The dog did not move. "Titan." Still nothing. The shepherd's gaze stayed fixed on the entrance. Caleb recognized that posture from years ago. Decision made. Mission accepted. There was no moving him now. The trucks stopped outside. Doors slammed. Men shouted over the wind. A flashlight beam swept across the porch. Then a fist pounded the front door hard enough to shake the frame. "Open up!" Another voice laughed. "Mercer, we know you're in there!" Caleb's jaw tightened. Victor would never come himself. He outsourced unpleasantness the way other men outsourced laundry. The pounding came again. Titan barked once, explosive and close enough to make the lantern glass tremble. Outside, voices quieted. Then footsteps moved off the porch, around the sides of the house, checking windows. Back entrance. Caleb moved fast now. He grabbed the truck keys, phone, flashlight, and Earl's lockbox documents from the table, slid them into a canvas bag. Then he opened the cellar hatch leading toward the vault stairs. "Down," he ordered. Titan looked at the hatch, then at the front door. The dog did not obey. A sharp metallic sound came from the kitchen side window. Pry bar, glass cracking. Caleb's pulse surged. He pointed. "Titan. Guard." The shepherd exploded toward the sound. Caleb killed the lantern in the hallway and moved into shadow beside the kitchen archway. The window frame burst inward. A man climbed through, boots first, muttering. Titan hit him mid-drop. The intruder screamed and fell backward over the sink, crashing dishes and chair legs in every direction. Another man outside shouted. Caleb reached the fallen pry bar, kicked it away, and hauled the intruder upright by his collar. "Stay still." The man smelled of diesel and fear. Titan stood inches away, teeth bared, waiting only for a reason. From the front porch came a louder crash. They were forcing the main door. Too many. Caleb shoved the intruder toward the floor and slammed the kitchen door shut between rooms. "Cellar," he ordered Titan. This time the dog obeyed, but reluctantly, backing toward the hatch while keeping eyes on Caleb. The front door splintered. Boots thundered into the hallway. Caleb dropped through the cellar hatch, pulling Titan after him, and dragged it closed overhead. Darkness swallowed them. Above, men rushed room to room, furniture overturned, cabinets slammed. One voice yelled, "Find the papers!" Not robbery. Targeted. Victor had told them exactly what mattered. Caleb crouched on the stairs with Titan pressed against his leg, both listening. Then came a sound worse than shouting. A faint scrape above the grain shed direction. Someone outside had found the second entrance. The vault. Caleb swore under his breath. He and Titan moved through the underground corridor, lit only by flashlight. At the far ladder beneath the shed hatch, voices filtered down. "Doors here!" "Pry it!" Metal clanged overhead. Titan's entire body vibrated with readiness. Caleb gripped the collar. "Wait!" The hatch groaned open. Cold rain hissed down. A beam of light probed the ladder. One boot descended, then another. Titan launched. The impact knocked the man backward into the ladder, sending him crashing up into the others. Shouts erupted. Someone above swung wildly downward with something metal. Caleb yanked Titan back. Too late. The dog yelped once. A sharp, terrible sound. Then came rage. Titan surged again despite Caleb's hold, hit the second man square in the chest, and drove him out of the hatch onto the shed floor above. Bodies crashed. Men cursed. One yelled, "Forget it! Go!" Truck engines roared outside moments later. Retreat. Cowards choosing speed again. Caleb climbed into the grain shed. Rain and sleet blew through broken boards. One flashlight spun on the floor. The men were already running for their trucks. Headlights fishtailed down the lane and vanished into trees. Titan stood in the center of the shed, chest heaving. Blood darkened the fur near his shoulder. Caleb dropped to his knees. No, buddy." The wound was narrow but deep enough to matter. Likely from the metal bar swung in panic. Titan licked Caleb's hand, still trying to comfort him. Caleb tore open the medical kit from the truck bag and pressed clean gauze hard against the wound. The dog flinched, but did not pull away. "You stay with me," Caleb said, voice shaking now. "You hear me? Stay." His phone caught one bar of signal near the open doorway. He called the sheriff, then Dana, then Harold. Then he sat in the sleet-soaked shed with Titan's head in his lap, hand pressed to the bandage, whispering nonsense the way people do when love outruns language. Sirens arrived 20 minutes later. Then headlights from Harold's truck. Then Dana's SUV sliding hard around the final bend. Deputies spread through the house and yard taking statements, finding damage, photographing pry marks, broken locks, blood drops, tire tracks. Dana knelt beside Caleb and Titan. "Vet clinic in town is ready." Caleb nodded but could not seem to stand. Harold crouched too. "You did good, boy," he told Titan. "Did real good." The dog's tail moved once weakly. At the clinic, bright lights and antiseptic smell closed around them. A veterinarian in blue scrubs took Titan through swinging doors. Caleb tried to follow. The nurse blocked him gently. "We need space to work." He stood there in wet clothes, hands red with Titan's blood, suddenly useless. Old panic rose sharp and fast. Dana stepped beside him. "Breathe." He didn't. She gripped his forearm hard enough to anchor. "Caleb, Look at me. He did. Your dog is alive. He is with professionals. You are not losing him tonight. The sentence cut through the storm inside him. He inhaled. Again. Again. Hours passed in a waiting room with muted television and burnt coffee. Rain became snow again outside. Finally, the veterinarian returned. He'll be fine, she said. Muscle injury, no major vessels hit. He's lucky. Caleb sat down hard. Not graceful, not dignified, just overcome. The vet smiled softly. He's asking for you. Titan lay groggy under blankets when Caleb entered recovery. One ear lifted. Tail tapped once. Caleb laughed through tears he did not hide. You reckless idiot! He placed a hand carefully on the dog's neck. Titan closed his eyes. Outside the clinic window, dawn was beginning. Victor Holloway had sent men to steal paper and found something else instead. He had awakened a man with something left to fight for, and wounded the one creature Caleb Mercer would never abandon. Titan came home 3 days later. The veterinarian insisted on rest, medication, limited movement, and strict supervision. Titan accepted none of those recommendations in spirit, though he tolerated them in practice because Caleb asked. The dog stepped carefully from the truck, shaved patch visible beneath a clean bandage, and paused in the yard as if taking inventory of every fence, scent, and roofline. Then he limped straight to the porch and lay beside the front door. Guard post resumed. Caleb knelt beside him. You don't have to do everything. Titan blinked once. That had never been part of the agreement. Inside the farmhouse, Dana Brooks had turned the kitchen into a war room. Legal pads covered the table. Copies of police reports lay stacked beside coffee mugs and county maps. Harold Finch had delivered photographs of tire tracks and pry marks. Miriam moved through the room, setting sandwiches down in front of people who forgot to eat. Dana tapped a folder with her pen. We now have attempted unlawful entry, property damage, witness statements, and one very talkative intruder who would rather cooperate than be charged alone. Caleb leaned against the counter. He named Victor? He named Victor's ranch manager, who named Victor after learning I can read financial records. Harold smiled into his coffee. I like her. Dana continued. Victor believed intimidation would make you fold quietly. Instead, he created evidence. Caleb looked toward the porch where Titan slept in sunlight. He also hurt my dog. Dana's expression cooled. Yes, and judges tend to dislike cruelty attached to greed. They began building the case. For years, Caleb had sat in rooms while others defined events around him. Now he was part of the strategy. Dana assigned tasks with military clarity. Caleb, timeline of all labor you performed on Holloway property. Harold, names of surveyors Victor sent over years. Miriam, every contractor who maintained this farm through the trust. She looked at Caleb again. And I need every message Rachel sent during the divorce that references hiding, pressure, or your mental health. He frowned. She won't have written that plainly. She doesn't need to. Entitlement leaves fingerprints. That afternoon, Caleb drove to town alone for the first time since the attack. Titan protested being left behind with dramatic wounded dignity. You need rest. Titan tried to follow anyway. Miriam blocked him with a broom. You heard the man. The dog sighed like a disappointed grandfather and returned to the porch. Caleb smiled all the way to town. Harlan County looked different now, not because the buildings had changed, but because fear had. The diner on Main Street still smelled of bacon grease and pie crust. The hardware store still displayed snow shovels in crooked rows. Pickup trucks still lined the curb outside the feed store. But people looked at him openly now. Some nodded. Some waved. A few approached awkwardly. The mechanic from before met him outside the post office. Heard about your dog, the man said. Hope he's healing. He is. The mechanic shifted. And I should have spoken up in court. Caleb studied him. Why did apologies always arrive after safety? Still, bitterness was heavy, and he was tired of carrying weight that belonged to others. "Do better next time," Caleb said. The man nodded gratefully. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Moran handed over copies of statements. "Those men folded quick," Moran said. "One claimed he thought he was hired for snow removal." "In the middle of the night with pry bars?" Moran shrugged. "Criminal genius wasn't on the resume." When Caleb left, he found Rachel waiting beside his truck. She wore a camel coat and no makeup. Wind tugged strands of hair loose across her face. For a moment, she looked like the woman he once met at a fundraiser. Then she spoke. "You're enjoying this." He stared at her. "My dog got stabbed." "I mean the town turning on my father." "Your father did that himself." She crossed her arms. "You always needed a villain. And you always needed someone else to blame." The words landed harder than he intended. She looked away first. "I didn't know he'd send men." "Maybe not. You think I'm like him. I think you learned from him." Silence stretched between them while traffic moved slowly on Main Street. Rachel's voice softened. "We could settle this. There's nothing left between us to settle. The farm is changing you." "No," Caleb said quietly. "It's showing me who I was before all this." Her eyes filled briefly with something close to grief. Then pride covered it. She stepped back. "Victor won't stop. Then he'll keep losing." He got in the truck and drove away. In the mirror, she remained standing there, small against the street, coat snapping in the wind. The hearing took place 2 weeks later in district court. Snowmelt dripped from courthouse gutters. Mud streaked the parking lot. The same steps where Caleb once entered ashamed now carried him upward with calm purpose. Titan came too, bandage gone, scar fresh under fur. He walked slower but proud, drawing smiles from clerks and veterans alike. Inside, the courtroom filled early. Harlan County loved scandal, but it loved reversal more. Victor sat at the defense table with 2 city attorneys. His confidence looked expensive and recently repaired. Dana stood alone at Caleb's side. Judge Eleanor Price entered and wasted no time. "Counselor," she said to Victor's team, "I understand we are here because your client believes repeated false filings and private intimidation constitute sound negotiation." One attorney began carefully. "Your Honor, my client denies any direct involvement." Dana rose. "With permission?" "Granted." She moved like a blade. Police statements, phone records linking Victor's ranch manager to the hired men. Bank transfers labeled consulting. Security footage from a gas station showing one intruder meeting the manager. County filings timed within hours of the attack. Then she placed a printed text exchange on the evidence screen. Rachel to Victor. "He won't scare easy anymore." Victor to Rachel. "Then hurt what he loves." The room inhaled as one. Victor's face went pale, then red. Rachel, seated in the back, covered her mouth. Caleb did not turn around. Judge Price removed her glasses slowly. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "do you have an explanation that does not insult this court's intelligence?" Victor stood halfway. "My words were taken out of context." "Then I recommend finding a context where they improve." Laughter broke before the gavel stopped it. Sanctions followed swiftly. Protective order. Financial penalties. Referral for criminal review regarding false filings and conspiracy to intimidate. And one final note entered into record. The Mercer Agricultural Trust remained solely Caleb Mercer's property, free of Holloway claims. The gavel struck. Done. Victor sank into his chair like a punctured tire. Caleb felt no triumph thunder through him, only clarity. This was never about defeating Victor. It was about no longer living beneath him. Outside the courthouse, reporters from 2 regional stations waited near the steps. Cameras turned as Caleb emerged with Titan beside him. Questions flew. "Mr. Mercer, what will you do with the farm? Do you forgive the Holloways?" Was the dog injured protecting trust assets? Titan sneezed at the microphones. The crowd laughed. Caleb answered only one question. What will you do now? He looked down at Titan, then at the mountains beyond town. Build something useful. They let him pass. When he returned to the valley, Harold was mending tack by the barn. Well? We won. Harold nodded. Again. Miriam hugged Titan first, Caleb second. Dana arrived later with groceries and a bottle of bourbon she claimed was for administrative purposes. That night, they ate at the long kitchen table while sunset turned the snow peaks rose gold outside the windows. No one talked about Victor much. He was shrinking already into the size he truly was. After supper, Caleb stepped onto the porch alone. Titan followed and sat beside him. The valley spread quiet and wide beneath twilight. Fields waiting for spring. Barn roof catching last light. Creek speaking softly through thawing ice. Caleb rested one hand on the dog's scarred shoulder. You saved me more than once. Titan leaned against him. Inside, voices and dishes and laughter moved through the warm house. For years, Caleb Mercer believed survival was the highest thing a man could ask for. Standing there in the fading light, he understood something better had begun. He was no longer surviving. He was returning. Spring arrived by degrees. First, the snowbanks thinned and sagged like tired walls. Then mud took the roads. Then the lower pasture flashed green in narrow strips where sun stayed longest. By late April, the valley had changed color completely. Caleb Mercer changed with it. He woke before dawn because he wanted to, not because nightmares dragged him there. He still had bad nights. Some mornings came with the old pressure in his chest and a mind scanning corners for threats that no longer existed. But now there were tools for those mornings. Coffee on the porch. Cold air. Titan's weight against his leg. Work waiting. Purpose had become medicine. The farmhouse kitchen became headquarters for something none of them had planned, and all of them recognized when it began. Dana spread documents across the table one rainy Tuesday. You can keep this place private, she said. Lease the patents, hire managers, live comfortably, and never speak to the public again. That sounds tempting. It also sounds small. Harold grunted agreement from the sink. Miriam slid cinnamon rolls onto a plate. Your grandfather built more than income, she said. He built shelter. Caleb looked out the window toward the barns. 3 veterans from town had visited in the last month. One needed work. One needed silence. One needed somewhere to sit without being asked questions. All 3 stayed longer than planned. What if, Caleb said slowly, we use it? Dana raised an eyebrow. For what? For people who need somewhere to land. No one spoke for a moment. Rain tapped the glass. Titan, asleep by the stove, opened one eye as if checking whether the room understood. Miriam smiled first. Well, there it is. Within weeks, the idea took shape. The Mercer Valley Trust would preserve Earl's agricultural work and operate a retreat program for struggling veterans, retired working dogs, and families trying to rebuild after crisis. No speeches, no slogans, just practical help. Rooms upstairs were repaired and furnished. Harold converted the old machine shed into a woodshop classroom. Miriam organized a pantry that somehow fed twice as many people as logic allowed. Dana handled permits, liability forms, grant applications, and anything involving officials who used words like framework. Caleb handled people. At first, that surprised him most. Men who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, places whose names still tightened the jaw. Women who had spent years holding broken families together. A former firefighter who jumped at every siren. A deputy who could not sleep after a wreck scene. They came stiff-backed and wary. They left boots by the door on the second day. Titan did half the work without paperwork. He knew who needed space and who needed contact. He lay beside panic attacks before they became public. He placed his head on knees at exactly the moment a man's face started hardening into embarrassment. He escorted children through barns with solemn patience and accepted being dressed in ribbons once by a 6-year-old girl whose mother had not laughed in months. Caleb watched all this and learned. Healing was rarely dramatic. Mostly it was repetition. Meals at regular times, hands busy, names remembered, being useful before being fixed. By June, the first support group met in the old hay barn. Rain drummed softly on the roof, while folding chairs formed a rough circle under string lights. No therapist podium, no fluorescent room, just people. Caleb almost canceled twice before it started. He hated circles of chairs. He hated introductions. He hated being expected to speak from wounds while strangers nodded professionally. But this was different. He opened simply. My name is Caleb. Some days I'm fine until I'm not. Some nights I wake up in places that no longer exist. A few heads lifted. Recognition. A man named Luis, former Marine infantry, spoke next. A woman named Renee, Army medic, spoke after him. Then a ranch wife whose husband never came but sent apologies through silence. Then an older Vietnam veteran who said only, I should have done this 40 years ago. No one clapped. No one offered cliches. When the meeting ended, they stacked chairs and went to eat chili in the kitchen. That felt more useful than anything official Caleb had ever attended. Titan became famous by accident. A regional newspaper ran a story. Retired K-9 helps veterans heal on hidden Montana farm. Then came visitors, then donations, then letters. Children mailed drawings of German shepherds wearing medals. Former handlers drove hours to meet him. One television crew requested an interview. Caleb declined. Titan accepted a steak from the disappointed producer and considered the matter settled. Yet fame carried odd gifts. An elderly man from Idaho arrived one afternoon with a cane and a cardboard box. Inside were old training logs and photos from Titan's first handler, who had died years earlier. I kept meaning to send these somewhere useful, the man said. Caleb sat with the box long after sunset. Puppy Titan climbing obstacles. Young Titan in harness beside a younger Caleb grinning under desert sun. Deployment notes in block handwriting. Strong nerves. Exceptional focus. Bonds deeply with a signed operator. Caleb touched the page gently. Yeah, he said to the dog asleep nearby. That part held. Not everything healed cleanly. One July afternoon, Rachel Holloway drove into the valley. No convoy, no lawyers, just a dusty SUV and a woman who looked less certain than she ever had before. Caleb found her standing near the orchard fence. Titan stood between them, not hostile, merely clear. Rachel looked thinner, tired in ways expensive clothing could not hide. Victor lost 3 developments, she said. Banks pulled back. Caleb said nothing. He blames everyone. That sounds familiar. She almost smiled, then didn't. I came to say I was wrong. Wind moved through the leaves. Caleb had imagined this moment once. Victory speeches, cold dismissal, questions sharpened for years. Instead, he felt mostly distance. About what? About using your pain when it suited me. About letting him define you because it benefited me. About court. About all of it. He studied her face. There was real shame there, late but real. I'm sorry Titan was hurt, she added quietly. The dog regarded her without comment. Caleb nodded once. I believe you. She blinked, surprised. That's it? What did you come for, Rachel? Punishment? Permission? I don't know. I forgave you months ago, he said. Not for you. For weight reasons. A laugh escaped her unexpectedly, then turned into tears she tried to hide. Titan stepped aside. Not welcoming. Allowing. Rachel wiped her face. I don't deserve kindness from you. Probably not, Caleb said, but I'm not handing out what was given to me by merit. She looked toward the farmhouse where voices drifted from open windows. You built something good. We're building it. She left a few minutes later, lighter than she arrived, though still carrying enough. Some burdens are not removed, only named. By late summer, the valley felt alive in every direction. Children chased chickens. Workshop hammers rang. The upper field produced Earl's drought-resistant barley in golden waves. Researchers from the university walked rows taking notes, while Harold judged them silently. Miriam ran the kitchen like a benevolent dictator. Dana visited weekly and pretended it was only for governance review. At dusk, Caleb often stood by the pasture fence watching people move through the place. Not guests, participants, needed by chores, meals, animals, one another. Titan, scar hidden now beneath grown fur, moved among them like an old sergeant inspecting morale. One evening, Luis approached Caleb near the barn. "Wanted to tell you something." "Okay." "I slept through the night for the first time in 3 years." Caleb nodded. "Good." Luis looked at him strangely. "That's all you got?" "What did you want, balloons?" Luis laughed hard enough to bend over. Then he hugged Caleb quickly and walked off before either could object. Caleb stood there smiling into sunset. Later that night, he hung something above the farmhouse fireplace. The framed $2 bill, the same worn note of humiliation, now preserved in walnut and glass. Dana watched from the sofa. "Bold decor choice." "It belongs here." Miriam stepped beside him. "Turn it over." He did. Under better light, faint pencil marks appeared on the back, coordinates, numbers, nearly vanished words. Titan came and lay beneath it. Caleb looked from the frame to the room full of warmth and voices, from insult to inheritance, from courtroom laughter to a house full of people healing. He touched the mantle once. Some things only reveal themselves when brought into the light. 1 year later, the valley no longer felt hidden. It felt rooted. Morning sun rolled over the eastern ridge and poured across fields of late-season barley, turning each head of grain into brushed gold. Trucks lined the lane. Children ran between hay bales tied with orange ribbon. Folding tables stretched beneath cottonwoods, covered with pies, cornbread, jars of preserves, and enough food to feed a town twice over. The first annual Mercer Valley Harvest Festival had begun before sunrise because Miriam Finch believed events should start when work usually did. "People trust a morning that smells like coffee," she declared. So the air was full of coffee, and wood smoke, and laughter. Caleb Mercer stood on the porch in a flannel shirt and clean jeans, holding 2 mugs while Titan sat at his boots like a carved guardian who occasionally accepted sausage from passing children. The dog was older now. His muzzle had silvered. He rose slower in cold weather. But his eyes were unchanged, steady, alert, amused by human chaos. Dana Brooks climbed the porch steps carrying a clipboard and a cinnamon roll. "You own too many tables," she said by way of greeting. "You filed all the permits." I said yes professionally. I disapprove personally. She took 1 mug from him and looked over the valley. Families moved through rows of pumpkins set near the orchard. Veterans from the retreat ran a woodcutting demonstration by the barn. 2 university researchers explained drought-resistant grain to farmers who trusted boots more than credentials. And everywhere Titan moved, people smiled. "It worked," Dana said quietly. Caleb watched a boy in leg braces throw a tennis ball while Titan patiently waited for permission to chase. "We're working," he corrected. She glanced at him. "That answer would have annoyed me a year ago." "What changed?" "You did." She went down the steps before he could answer. By noon, the place was full. Luis ran the grill like a battlefield commander. Renee organized children into pumpkin races with tactical precision. Harold Finch judged pie entries with the seriousness of federal law. Miriam ignored all judges and awarded prizes based on who helped clean up. Caleb moved through the crowd shaking hands, hauling boxes, fixing a loose hinge, answering questions about crops, greeting people by name. That last part still surprised him. He had once lived years half withdrawn from the world, Now he remembered names, birthdays, medication schedules, whose daughter started college, whose dog hated thunder. Purpose had expanded his memory. At the old machine shed, a young veteran named Carter stood staring at woodworking tools without touching them. Caleb recognized the look, wanting to begin something, but not trusting your own hands. "You ever build anything?" Caleb asked. Carter shook his head. "Then today's clean slate. I'll screw it up. Guaranteed." The young man frowned. Caleb handed him sandpaper. "That's how most worthwhile things start." Titan came and leaned against Carter's knee. The man froze, then slowly touched the dog's neck. His face changed, not healed, opened. Caleb had seen that expression many times now. The first crack where light enters. In the afternoon, Claire Holloway arrived with her 2 children. She had not visited the valley in months, though she donated quietly and asked often about Titan. Her daughter Emma, now 12, ran straight to the seed library with a notebook in hand. Her younger brother headed for the goats. Claire approached Caleb near the porch. "Am I late?" "You're on family time. That means no schedule." She smiled. There was less tension in her face these days. She looked around at the festival, the people, the repaired barns, the life moving through all of it. "My mother asked if I was coming." Caleb waited. "I told her yes." "And?" She cried. Wind moved a strand of hair across her cheek. "She's different now. Pain changes some people, and hardens others." He nodded once. Claire looked at Titan, who was letting Emma drape a harvest ribbon around his neck with saintly tolerance. "He always loved you," she said. Caleb laughed softly. "He loved snacks." "No," Claire said. "He watched doors until you came home." That landed deeper than she knew. She touched his arm briefly. "Thank you for not becoming bitter." Then she walked toward her children. Caleb stood still a moment longer. He had not realized how much of victory was simply refusing inheritance from the wrong people. Late afternoon brought speeches Caleb did not want. So naturally, Miriam forced one. She banged a spoon on a stockpot. "Quiet down. The man hates attention, so this will be quick." Laughter rolled across the yard. Caleb stood beside a hay bale stage, hands in pockets, Titan seated next to him like reluctant security. Faces looked up. Veterans, neighbors, researchers. Children sticky with pie. People who had come broken. People who had come curious. People who stayed. He cleared his throat. "A year ago I thought my life was over." The yard went still. "I walked out of court with $2 and a dog who knew more than I did." Smiles. Titan yawned theatrically. "I believed losing things meant I had failed. Marriage, reputation, time, pride." He looked toward the fields. "But land taught me something different. Winter can look like death from a distance. It isn't." Several farmers nodded. "It's preparation." He paused. "This valley exists because one man worked quietly for decades without applause. Earl Mercer believed value doesn't disappear because fools can't see it." Harold removed his cap. Caleb's voice roughened. "He left me money, yes, but money is the easiest part of inheritance to misunderstand." He rested a hand on Titan's shoulder. "He left me work worth doing, people worth serving, a dog who never once confused my worst days with my whole identity." Silence held for a beat. Then applause rose warm and full. Titan barked once, annoyed by the noise. The crowd laughed again. Speech concluded. Exactly how Caleb preferred it. That evening, as sunset lit the mountains copper, the crowd thinned. Cars rolled down the lane in strings of red taillights. Children left sleepy. Tables emptied. Chairs stacked. The valley exhaled. Inside the farmhouse, a smaller circle gathered around the fireplace. Miriam knitting, Harold dozing, Dana reviewing numbers she pretended not to enjoy. Luis washing dishes while singing badly. Titan asleep on the rug. Caleb stood before the framed $2 bill. The room's soft lamplight hit the glass just right. Faint pencil words on the back became clear again. "This is how I send you home." He traced the frame lightly. A year earlier, those words would have meant property. Now they meant something larger. Home was not coordinates, not acreage, not legal ownership. It was the place where your nervous system unclenched, where usefulness returned, where your scars were included in the blueprint, where someone waited for you without demanding performance first. Titan stirred and came to stand beside him. Old joints, slow steps, same loyalty. Caleb knelt with effort and wrapped both arms around the dog's neck. "You did it," he whispered. Titan licked his cheek once and leaned harder. Across the room, Dana looked up. "Everything all right?" Caleb smiled without standing. "Yeah." And for the first time in many years, it was fully true. Outside, night settled over the valley Earl Mercer had hidden, and Caleb Mercer had opened. Wind moved through grain ready for harvest. Stars gathered over the ridge. Inside, beneath the framed insult that had become a blessing, a former Navy SEAL sat beside the dog who carried him home. The $9.4 million had saved his future. But that was never the greatest gift. The greatest gift was learning he had been worth saving long before he knew it himself. If you believe a person's worth can't be measured by money, comment 1. If you think loyalty like Titan's is the rarest kind of wealth, comment 0. And if stories about justice, dignity, and standing your ground still mean something to you, subscribe and come back for the next one.